Okay, so from here, once I have this side in, I'm gonna come back around over to this side and I'm gonna start measuring down and get the front paw in, and then I'll measure in some of that side paw, and then we'll do the bow last. So if I'm going to come from here to here and figure out where his body needs to come off of his head from, I'll line this up. It's this distance down his head. Line that up and then do 1.5. Put that in, and here is where my body should come off of the head. And then I can also come through and measure, and I'll always start from grid line to grid line because you never know if this line you put in is correct or not. I'll line it up. There's where my ear comes. I actually want my body. Let's switch that out. And then line that up and do 1.5. Should be right up in there, and that's where this should come down. And if I look at the angle, I want to kind of follow that angle, add that line, and then I'm going to see where it comes on the next spot it intersects my grid. Take that one, erase the old one. Okay, and now this comes down about halfway and then scoops out. So I want to kind of match that a little bit. Okay, so if I start to follow my line, it intersects next with the tail, and I don't have the tail in at this point. I could come in and start to measure in this piece, but I think I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna measure in the paw right here and here and get this in and start putting those pieces in next. That's where I'm gonna go next. Okay, so if I want, I'm going to come and line up with the center of my grid, the corner of my paper to the center of my grid. I'm gonna make a mark as to where that paw intersects this line, okay? So then I'll line it up the same on this grid, corner in the same corner. Here's 1.5. And I'm gonna make that mark, and that is where my paw should come cross there. So now I wanna know where it's gonna cross on the other side. So I can use this line to line up my paper with, and then line the measuring edge up here and mark where this line crosses my grid. There's 1.5, and here's where the 2 spots will cross on my grid, here and here. So now what I like to do is kind of find the middle of that and measure how far down that paw goes. Okay, so it's about this deep from about the middle. Here's about the middle. So it should come down about this far. And it's gonna come out, and then it's gonna swoop up. Okay, so I'm really analyzing piece by piece to see where that happens. And you know what I just realized? This is 1 time. This is 1 time. Here's my middle where I measured. We need to go 1.5. So my foot should actually come down here, and that's why when I was looking at it, I was thinking proportionally it didn't look near as deep or you know, bigger than that one. So now I know why. Again, down. then it swoops up. And again, if I put this in nice and light, if I need to make adjustments as I go because something doesn't quite look right, I can do that. Okay, so now this is gonna come up and it's gonna swoop around almost back to the body, which we don't have in yet. But it does come out past here. So I could kind of, you know, at this point, I would kind of just eyeball in. It should come about this high, and we want to swoop all the way out past, because I can, once I get this in, and it, you know, it comes down and it comes out past here, and I'll just leave it really light, because once I start to put in the other pieces, I can make adjustments to make it all measure out quite right. But I can look, you know, here, and I can double check here, and like, you know, it's a little thin, so I can make some adjustments through there. All right, so now that paw is in there, so now I can come over, I'm gonna start to measure in this portion of the foot, and then we'll start connecting things up. So I'll start with how far up this edge of the grid the foot touches right here. So in this case, I've put the corner where the foot is touching, and I'm gonna mark where the edge is. I could turn it this way and put the corner here and mark where the foot touches. It'd be the same distance. So there's 1.5, and there's where my foot needs to touch, right here. And then if I go to where the foot is gonna come back off, so I have this section where it's touching the line, make that mark, erase out the old one, come up, find my half, which again, if you guys struggle with eyeballing the half, fold it and get half that way. Fold it in half and you'll get your half measurement. And you might, if you're eyeballing, you might want to fold in half and just double check that you're getting your half correct. There's mine, I'm pretty on point. Just so that you don't keep guessing and you're like way off. Okay, so now I need to know where the heel crosses on this line. So that's what I'm gonna check next. And I line the edge up with this line, put the corner where the foot crosses, and I'm gonna put the line right here where this line hits. And I'm gonna line it up the same way over here, and then do 1.5. And here's where my heel should come around. Okay, so now this section, when we know it, it's gonna come down through here, and then it goes almost halfway and curves in. And then it has another little wrinkle section that curves in. And then it comes down just below that, and then it comes and curves as the heel. And exactly this curve we can fine tune. Oops. We can fine tune that a little bit better once we start putting in this bow. Okay, so now I've got things measured in. I can't connect the body or the paw or anything till I get this bow in. And I do know that our foot is coming, it curves up almost back to the top of the paw, but not quite. So we're gonna do that, okay? And again, we can adjust the little angles if we need to, but for now that's good. And now we can start to measure in our tail, okay? So we're gonna start with the points on the tail, the things that we know are for sure, and that's where they should hit on the grid. Because all these other lines of the body we've put in, so they may or may not be correct. So we want to rely more on the points on the grid. So I'm going to put the corner of my measuring paper right here in this corner. I'm going to come down and I'm going to mark where the tail crosses. And I want you to keep in mind there is a little button or tack or whatever this little circle deal is that holds his tail on. I think it's supposed to be a tack because there's the pin right there, sort of where pin the tail on the donkey. Anyway, we're going to just draw the tail without the circle and then we'll add the circle on after, okay? So, double check here, okay. So here's my 1 time plus half. Here's where my tail, the top part should cross my line. So now I want to get where it crosses underneath. Crosses right here. So I'll measure that. 1.5. Okay, so now what I would do is I would come in and I would just get, there's this tiny little distance between the line of the grid here and where the tail starts up his paw. And I would just make sure I marked that as well. And then I know this line just kind of connects. So I can just kind of connect it. And then I would probably come in and I would measure the distance or the width of the tail. So here's the width of my tail. 1.5. So I know that the other side should go about right there, okay? Now, you know, you can kind of get this part drawn in, but of course I always like to make some kind of measurement to make sure that I get it in correctly. So what I would do is line the end up with my grid and slide it down for the end of the tail right here, okay? And that's 1. And sometimes I'll make, this is a line of a grid, and if I put that there, then I know where to line up with, okay? So, that's 1.5 out, and then 1.5 down, and that's about where that point of that tail should be right there. And then we could see that it kind of, it swoops and then curves down, and then curves down, and then this one curves out. And again, I don't want it to look dot to dot, so if this curve doesn't quite match, I'm gonna smooth it out just a touch. And then we want our circle, and the best thing to do with the circle, the circle crosses kind of here, and it leaves a gap in the tail, and it comes out over here, and it probably comes right around in here. And so then I'll circle this, and then I will try to make the same shape. It's proportioned out a little bit bigger. And you know, if you go around multiple times, you get a more accurate circle. But I can come in and I can kind of clean that up. But I'm just gonna kind of leave it like that for now. And when I start doing my shading, I can kind of fix that and correct it up. Okay, so from that point, now I can start to add, I can finish up this curve, and I can finish up this section here, okay? So let's do this curve first. So from the paw out the tail, that's what we're gonna measure right now to where this body crosses on the tail. So put the corner at the paw, mark where the body hits on the tail, I'll put the corner at the paw, mark here, go out 1.5, and so the body's supposed to hit right here. Now, I put this line in and I brought it all the way down. Excuse me. I brought it all the way down and it doesn't come all the way down. So I can just erase it back up a little bit and get it out of the way. Now this line curves way out. So that's what I'm gonna do. but again, I want it to look smooth and I want it to look like it kind of matches that. So go really lightly, and if you have to make adjustments, smooth things out a little if you need to. Okay, so from there, it's kind of easy to see that the body hits right where the button comes. This button kind of overlaps right here a little bit. And the body comes out right there. And I can measure this little section from the tail up his arm. And it should be 1.5. It's right in here. And then I can just, you know, sort of connect those to match the way that it does right here. And that gets my body in. And then one of the things I can kind of look, okay, so this line, it does kind of come down like that. And it does kind of right in here have sort of a second little wrinkle in there. And there we go. And I also have, if you look right here, there's another second little wrinkle coming out kind of right there. But this one is a little longer, so I'll make those little adjustments right now. Okay, so what I would do next is I would come in and start to put in my bow and the tail. Excuse me. So I'm gonna make some extra grid lines to use because the tail or the bow doesn't really hit any. It hits this one right here, but it doesn't have, and it hits here and here, but all of these spots don't really have grid lines. So if I come in and I just place in this line that connects from one grid line to the next, and I can do the same over on this side of the bow. I'm gonna make sure it's nice and straight. And I can bring it all the way up to where that line goes, okay? Now, if I do that, I now have to put it over here, okay? So I'm gonna measure out where on my line does this come up at. So to go out this far, 1.5. So here's where I need to come up, and I gotta make sure that it's nice and straight. So I'm gonna line this end up, and then I'm going to very lightly bring it up to the edge of the grid there. And I'm gonna do the same thing for my second line I made over here. And in this case, I'm gonna measure between this grid line and the one I put. So I'm gonna put this at the corner of that one. I'm gonna draw my line there. I'm gonna put this at the same corner and go 1.5. And that's where my new grid line should go up at. So again, I want it nice and straight. I'm gonna line this up with the edge of my grid, and I can kind of check that this line is parallel with my measuring paper, and then very lightly put in my new line. So now I have 2 more reference lines that I can use to help me measure in my bow, okay? So this, I purposely made sure that I added this line in kind of right where this bow touches. So we know that the bow has a curve right there where this all touches. And then I'm gonna measure down from that spot to where the curve of this top portion crosses back over, which is right here. So there's 1.5. So kind of right here, and it kind of comes and swoops. And I'm gonna swoop it in, and I'm kind of, you know, eyeballing a little bit, because again, as I get my measurements in, I can adjust that to look correct and proportional. So now I can measure where the bottom portion of the bow crosses, both spots here. I'm gonna start with the top one. And goes that high up, 1.5. 1.5. So it's gonna come, so we have sort of kind of comes down and then it comes out. So I'm gonna do that a little bit. And now I'm gonna measure where it crosses at the bottom. One and a half, and it should come back around right there. Okay, and I can even measure out how far out it should go before it starts to curve back. So 1.5. And it actually, like, it kind of comes down farther and then curves back, like sort of like this. And again, if my lines aren't smooth, I can smooth them out. So now I have that end of my bow. So the tail has to come down through the middle before we can figure out this section, because we have to get the tail in first. So I'll come back up to the top and I'll bring the top of my bow around and down, and then I can start connecting the tail pieces, okay? So I'm gonna measure where on this line the bow crosses right here. And I'm gonna measure up to that. Let me erase all my old lines. So 1.5. So here's where we're gonna come back down and around to, okay? So back down to that. And then I am going to I think I want to measure how this section comes up through here. Top and bottom I'll have to get separately, but we know that our tail is going to come, or the center of our bow is going to cross right there. So that's what I'm going to find right now. So here's where the center of my bow crosses on that side, and now I'm going to get it on this side. It's 1.5. Okay. So that's where my bow, my tail kind of crosses over, and we'll have to put in the rest of the bow to know how high up it needs to go before we can really cap it off at the top. So, but now I'm going to come over and I'm going to start to measure in this side. Actually, I think I'm going to measure in the top of this bow. And if I just kind of line this up and put in a little bit of a line right here, I can measure up to that line. Now I know that, yeah, so now I know that the top of my bow should kind of come up right in here, okay? And it kind of curves like this. So that's what I'm gonna do. Now I have the top, and now I can kind of bring this on down and kind of connect it just below, because this would be curving over the top. So we want to just connect it just below. Okay. Now I can start to measure these and bring them in as well. So here is where the bow touches at the very top of this line. So that's where I'm going to place the corner of my paper, and then I'm going to draw a little line along the bottom here. And that's how far up that line it needs to be. So 1.5. Okay, so there's where it intersects, and it actually kind of curves up from here. It also, you know, it connects right here and it comes up like so. Okay, so here's where it comes back off the line, so I need to measure to that. Get rid of my old lines. Mark that. Measure up 1.5, and here's where it should come back off the line, and again it's going to come off and then swoop down, and that swoop comes down almost even with this one, so I'll just use that as sort of a reference. This side of the bow is a little skinnier because your bow is actually tipped. So this side of your bow should look smaller and this side should look a little bit bigger. It's not even because it's tipped in the picture, if that makes sense. So I'm going to come down and measure the bottom portion of our bow. So corner where it intersects the grid line, and then mark the bottom of the grid. And I now need to measure up from the bottom of the grid this far, plus 1/2. So right in here. And it kind of swoops around and comes back across right there. So erase my old line, measure up to that spot. 1.5, and there we go. Okay, so now this bow portion, it swoops kind of up and out kind of right there. Okay, so the rest of the bottom of the bow, we have to get the hair in, and then we can connect those, and then we can also connect up the pieces of the tail that are coming here. So essentially I just need to know about where to make the tail from this side, because the tail comes out even with the bow on either side here. And then connects with the hand. So this side connects way up here. And so to just kind of get that in about correct, I'm gonna put the corner on the line. I'm gonna mark where the bow touches on the paw, and then I'm gonna measure down the paw that much. 1.5, should be right in there. So this side, and if I trace this, it kind of curves up to that. So this side's gonna go and kind of curve up to that. Okay, and then I would do the same. It comes here, which is just past the edge. The real tip is gonna get the stitch line here, and it touches just to the other side of the stitch line. So I don't even really need to measure that. I can kind of eyeball that one in, and then it's gonna swoop over. So we'll just kind of swoop it over. And sometimes I like to check my width over here, because as it's curling around, it's actually kind of getting wider. So I actually might want to make some adjustments here. Yeah, so I'm gonna adjust my little bow thing to come out a little bit wider right here. I can clean it up a little. And then I can make this line actually come a little wider. And I actually think that proportionally it looks a little bit more correct. Okay, and since I started my stitch line on this section, I'm just gonna finish it real quick, and then we'll come down and do the hair before we finish all of the stitch line. So if I put my corner right here where the stitch line crosses this line, come down here, mark the bottom of the grid, line it up with the bottom of the grid, go 1.5, make the mark. I always compare, does it proportionally kind of look correct? I think it's a little high, so I'll adjust it just a touch. And then it comes all the way up to the crest of his foot and kind of curves and crosses right in there. So I'll do that. And then he's got his two little stitch lines here and one kind of down here. Okay. All right, so now we can do the hair. And honestly, with the hair, it's hair, so it can be a little bit, you know, not perfect. But I will come in and I'm like, okay, I have a point that goes here, and it comes past this line. You know, it's gonna kind of cross here, and it's gonna midway here kind of, and I'll just kind of start eyeballing those in. This one comes almost to here. Okay, so there's that point. Then I have this skinny little point that comes out, and then it curves up along this little grid line. So I'm gonna curve it up, and then it's gonna come around. Let's just see how tall the hair should be, and that'll give us an idea here. So the hair should be about this tall. So we'll bring this up, and it actually comes over kind of a little squarish, round, squarish, flat. Okay, and then I'm gonna have it come, I'm gonna end up with another sort of point here, right where this line is. Then I get kind of another little skinny one, and it kind of comes up and around, and then I'm gonna get a piece of hair that curves around like this. It's gonna come up, and then I'm gonna get a piece that comes out and around, and then it's going to curve back up and around to here. And it's close. It actually looks kind of wide, maybe a little bit off. I can make some adjustments here, clean it up a little bit. It's probably wide out this way. That piece is really small, so we'll make some adjustments there. You really have to look back and forth and kind of analyze here and there. Now this bow is going to come up kind of right in here, so I'll swoop it around, and I actually think this probably comes in a little more. And I'll just kind of keep tweaking it until I get it the way that I think it should be, or that I like it. And this one just kind of curves as well. Okay, and then again, I can look here where the foot comes. It touches right where the bow crosses this line. That's where the foot's coming to from the heel. So that's what I'll do. And I actually think it looks like it kind of comes up a little, so I might make a little bit of an adjustment through here so that it looks like it goes up. Okay. And then here on his leg, it's coming to kind of curve out this way from about the center of his button here. And I can actually take my measuring paper here. I'm going to erase off old marks. And I can come out from where his paw, I actually should line this up with his, I'm checking here. We want to line it up with the, this grid line. And this is where, how far out that spot should be. And it lines up kind of right with the edge of that button, so kind of do that. There's 1, 2, so it should kind of come out to there, which is pretty much what I had eyeballed. And then now I can take this and I can kind of connect down to it, and it has it like a bit of a toe, and then it swoops down, and then there's another little wrinkle. Okay, so I'm gonna come up, I'm gonna create a little bit of a toe, then I'm gonna come and I'm gonna short it just a little because there's a second little wrinkle, and then I'll add that little line in. Okay, and that gives me my other foot. And he's kind of got like some lines running in here. He's got a stitch line that kind of comes right up along here. I can see that it's almost even with his arm line. Comes out of the bow about where the bow starts to touch right here. So I can connect those. There's a stitch here and here. And then he has a second little line that runs kind of just this side of there. That's like his belly line, I think. Kind of how his belly kind of curves out. Okay, so from there, that's all of our, we could put in our little loops here, and they are gonna run right up along the edge, sort of balloon out and come right back to the same exact spot that it goes under. And we can do that on both sides. This one is, kind of comes out, kind of connects a little bit before that. Put those in. And you know you're gonna have some shadowing that'll end up coming out through here and here, but we can do all that when we start shading. We'll just leave the lines only. And so now I'm gonna go through and start putting in stitch lines. So this stitch line comes up just down from, and it curves around the follow of the toe, and it crosses right here. And so I'll measure that real quick just to make sure I get that kind of correct. So 1.5 is kind of right here. And then I'll kind of look where it connects. You could see that the stitch line touches the bow right where this little extra line we made. So here's the extra line, here's where it touches. So that's where that stitch line is going to go. It's going to come out. It's going to follow his foot. It's coming down and curving significantly right here. And then back up to that spot. And then I can put in his stitch. It's got 2 here. It's kind of got 1 right here. It's got 2 right here. And 1 more up over here. Okay, so we have that stitch line, that one, and that one. Now we need the front foot here, the side belly, this foot, and then his face. That's all of his stitching lines. Then we can go into putting in his hair and then his facial features. And then our sketch will be finished and ready for shading. Okay, so for this stitch line. So we measured this in, we have it right here. The stitch line is just up from that, about that far. So I would just kind of put that in a little bit. There's the stitch line. It's going to follow the edge of the foot. It comes just before the end, right here. And so we just need where it crosses right there. So again, I can erase old marks. I can measure where it crosses. 1.5, we'll put it right in here. So now I can just bring this down. Follows that. And just this little curves here and then curves down. So that's what I'm gonna do. And then up here we have a couple wrinkles. And the wrinkle starts kind of up above this line and comes along that crease of the arm right here. There's this another little one that comes out right here. And then we have one more that kind of comes kind of right through here. And we'll just put those little tiny lines in there to help guide us when we start our shading. And then we need a little stitch mark there. We have two kind of right down here. And then right through this little curve of the arm, we're gonna have this bit of a roll here. And I actually think he's quite bigger than that. So we add that in, and I'll clean up the middle of it. But one of the things that we can do is we can measure how wide it should be. And then when you're drawing that in, you can make sure it's that wide. And see, I didn't get it quite wide enough. So, you know, I can widen it back. I can widen it out a little more. Clean out the middle a little bit. And then as we start shading, we can kind of, you know, do different things with it, because I think this actually needs to come and swoop back, and this needs to swoop out more. Okay, now we're gonna come and we're gonna look at our stitch line. Stitch line runs just this side of the X, so I'm gonna do that. It comes about that far down, and as you get better and better, you can eyeball those a little more, this kind of details, but you can also kind of keep measuring 1.5, just kind of right in there. And then it's gonna come out of from his arm, so from where that touches down to the arm, that's what we're gonna measure, where his belly touches to the side of his arm. And this only works if you've gotten all your measurements right. But if it looks right so far, then you can use lines you've drawn. Otherwise, you should try to stick to the graph lines, okay? So there's where my stitch line should come out. Comes straight down and kind of curves right into that. And it has 2 stitches right there. So his leg actually starts right above that line from the belly. It curves down and comes up sort of in between, halfway in between the crest and where it touches. Maybe not quite half. So kind of right in here. It's gonna follow the foot a little and then swoop down. And we just need to measure where that stitch line crosses. Okay, so that's where it would cross. I feel like I already kind of marked it because there's a mark there. So it's gonna kind of curve here. So that's what I'm gonna kind of curve it here. And then it's gonna come up and swoop into that. And then it has 1 stitch here, and 2 right here, and 1 up here. Okay, so on the face now, that's what we have hair and we have face. So I'm gonna put in his mouth and his nostrils in this little line. We'll put in his hair, and then we can do the stitch line and then the eyes based off all of that, okay? So the smile follows the line of the mouth, or the face, the bottom of the face follows the line, and it comes up, and about that line, it's gonna have a little bit of a curve on it. And it does it on the same. It follows here, follows up about halfway, and then it has a little bit of a curve. Okay, so these are where his smile is bulging out from the edge of his lips, okay? So that's why we wanna kind of center those in there, and that's his smile. And then we have 1 nostril, and you can see that the nostril is centered to this center. So our other nostril is gonna be out over here, and we want it to kind of match that one, and it's kind of right in the middle. and we want to make them the same size. This one is actually a little bit smaller than that one, and their angles don't quite line up, so that's kind of what I'm doing, okay? And again, when we start shading, we can correct that stuff. The other thing here now is this line. We want to put this line in, and it starts at the top of each of these spots, okay? And then it curves up. So really, if we just measure right here, we can follow that curve and we can get that in. So that's what I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna measure up. I'm gonna line it up on the grid. Crosses right here. So I'm gonna go the same spot, 1.5, and I'm gonna put that in. Okay, so now I can just come out, swoop this up, come out and start swooping this one and make them match, kind of right there. And again, I put it in really light. I can make adjustments as I need to. And I actually think if you look here, it keeps kind of going up past here and then kind of swoops down. So that's what I'm gonna put that in, and then I can just kind of clean this up a little bit. That's how I adjust my lines. Okay, so from here, I wanna put in the hair so that we can then take this line right up into the hair, and then we'll put in the eyes, and then we'll be done. So when I start looking at this hair, I definitely make note that the bulk of the hair is kind of over here, okay? So that's what I'm gonna do when I start putting this in, is I have one spike, and it starts kind of in here, and it comes down. And this, again, if you need to measure, you should measure, but if you can kind of eyeball in the key spikes the way that they should go, then you can do that. So this one should curve across this line. So that's what I'm gonna do. And then he's got a little baby spike that kind of comes out right here. So I'll add him in. And then it kind of swoops this way and brings a spike out over here. So I'm gonna do that. He also has a little baby one in there. And then it curves back and it comes across. And if I look, it comes across like this, kind of even with that one. So that's what I'll do. And then we have one curved down, and it curves, everything stays on that side of the line now. So that's what I'll make sure that it does. And the one thing that I will want to do is see how far down this line the hair goes. And then I'll want to measure that so I don't go any farther than that as I'm putting in the hair, because then it'll start getting in the way of eyes. Okay, so I'm on this spike and I have this much room, so that's kind of perfect. So put that one in. And then this one swoops and comes almost all the way down and touches, and then swoops all the way back up to here. Okay, so it's gonna swoop back up. It's got a little bit of a spike here, but I'm gonna smooth that line up and bring it all the way back up, just about even with the top of his head. And about this far down. And a half. Nope, is that correct? That is correct. Okay, double check because it didn't feel right. And half. So that's semi-correct. That's where the spike comes down, okay. But I'm up here, so that I measured to here, I need to come up here. So I'm gonna now swoop it around. And then I'm gonna bring this spike here. And I'm gonna add a spike kind of here. And then he's got these two little ones that come out. We got one that kind of comes out this way, and one that kind of comes out right here. And then we had a little bit of a deviation right here that I didn't put in at first. But now I've got his hair, the shape of his hair pretty much in. I can erase out the middle part. And then I will just leave it like that because that's the outline and I don't need to fill it in yet. I'll do that when I do all the shading. But if I look here, the stitch line is coming down from right around in here in his hair. And then we're gonna cross right there. So that's what I'm gonna measure to. I'm gonna come up. There's where I need to come up to. There's 1.5. So just kind of crossing right there, and I always kind of look, you know, is that space, does it feel all proportional? And to me it does. So it's going to come through there, but I probably need to measure, and I do see that it comes to right here. And I can measure one or both of these lines just to be sure that I'm on the right track and getting the curve correct. So now I'll just connect these lines as smooth and rounded and as nice as I can. I'll kind of connect those lines. There we go. And he has a stitch kind of right here. He's got 2 that are below this line. And then he's got 2 that are just kind of where it's starting to cross over. Okay? Stitch lines are in. Everything's now in except for the eyes. So now I've left the eyes kind of to the end because I can place them. I can use a lot of things to place them. Depending how good you are, you could do your oval and you could kind of place it in there about right, like it comes down. If you look here what it's even with, it's about even with this line. It comes kind of down with this spike, down with this one, and it comes up almost to that one. So there's sort of where the oval should be. Okay, and I can make adjustments. And of course I'm doing the oval with the eyelid and everything because once I have it in, then I add the eyelids and stuff and make all the details. But I'm not gonna do any of that till I have both eyes in and I'm comfortable with how both eyes are, because if I start looking, this one is gonna come kind of in even over here. He's gonna be fairly even with this. In here. Okay, so they don't entirely line up. And so then I do this circle. Okay, so once I have the ovals in and I'm happy, I can kind of clean them up a little. Thin out the lines. So the shape of the eyes really kind of helps determine the look on his face. The shape of the eyes, and then the shape of the eyelids and the pupils and all of that. So once I have sort of the ovals in, you can see that this kind of curves up. And it goes past to the inside for like eyelashes, and it does the same on this side. And the curve of this kind of matches. All right. And then I'm gonna look at his pupils here, and they starts just inside Okay, and then it comes to this very corner, and it's not quite half of the space. And then we're gonna do the same over here. We start a little bit to the inside, and this one, it actually comes in a bit. It doesn't come out to the corner. And then again, not quite half. There's more white at the bottom than there's dark at the top, okay? He is gonna have these little bags, and I just put a little line under there to help me remember when I go to start shading. But it's really, really, really light, okay? Because we're gonna actually put those in with shading, and we may not want them very dark. So now I just have to do the eyebrows, and again, I kind of look, the eyebrow point is even with the edge of the eye, and it's up, kind of higher, and then I can kind of also measure where the eyebrow should be here. So the top touches there, 1.5, so the top should come in right around there, which is about even with my spike. It's about right. It should be about that wide. So come in 1.5, kind of there. I kind of look, I don't feel like that's quite right, so I might short it up just a tiny bit, because it would be better for it to kind of match. Okay, so I get that one in, and now I want to do the other one, and the other one needs to be about the same height up and kind of lined up. And then this one disappears into his hair, kind of even with the other one. And I can kind of tweak with them until I'm happy with them. Until I feel like they look kind of matched. And now I have all of the details I need for the sketch in. That's it. Oh, I could do these lines. We could do these lines, or we can also do them when we start sketching, but this one kind of comes out from right here, and it joins up here. And this, if you look, this line actually curves up kind of even with the eyebrow. So that line kind of goes up, and this one comes up to it. Okay, so we just really need to know where it crosses right here. So I can measure out that, making sure all my old lines are erased so I don't get confused. Here's where that inner ear line sort of crosses. There's one. So sort of in here. And then again, this curves up, almost an S. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna kind of follow this line. And if I feel like it's too steep or whatever, I mean, I can shallow it out, I can make it sharper. And I sort of have that inner ear line, and I can do the same over here. And again, this line actually extends up, you know, midway up his eyebrow. Just kind of follows the contour of his face. And then this one's gonna start kind of right in here. We need this much space between the ear and that 1.5. It's kind of right in there. And this one curves up, swoops down, and then curves up here. So now we have the outer ear portions and the inner ear portions drawn in. And our sketch is now actually officially complete. So from here we would start to erase out our grid and we would start our shading.